So you've seen a lot of technology out there and a lot of virtual worlds, and one of the things I want to focus on is the other stuff, and that is real world objects and our imagination, and the importance that plays within all the technology and virtual worlds. So I'm working on several projects, but the main project I'm going to talk about in this session is really combining Riches, which is a rich artifact digital humanities archive, which not many students use. It's a wonderful interface. You get time maps and timelines and so forth to find out exactly what you want and all the information, but it's all disparate, all listy. It's all, it doesn't connect things together. And one of the things I want to show is the importance of threading this, not in time or space, but with stories, because that's how our mind is configured. We're hardwired for story. We're hardwired for play and for game. And those are the things that we need to do to pull that story out of things and places, especially those things and places that represent people that don't have a voice yet, that have passed away or lost their voice through an injury. So we've been working on another thing called story troves. This is a trove of artifacts that is authored. It's authored to have juxtaposition and layering and positioning. So the objects themselves are authoring this story. But they aren't authoring it like a movie director telling you the story. It's giving you bits and pieces to provoke your own imagination to develop your own story, and working with others in what we call storytelling conversation, this back and forth. Story's no longer one way, it's two-way. We're finding it, we're discovering it, we're pulling it together. And that's one of the things that's interesting about history. It's not about facts, it's not about names, it's not about dates. It's about filling in and bringing the dramatic context to the facts that are there. The facts are there, they're just there. But it's the links that bring them together and make meaning for us. And so we need to combine this artifact in the museums with the digital archive, that's being taken, and bring it together in a meaningful way through the story trove and start working with an app. So really, story transcends media. And what we have here is an opportunity to start to look at story again. Because each medium, like Harry Potter, you see it in the book, you see it in the film, you see it in the game, in the theme park, they're all wonderfully done. It's all the same story, but each one is told differently. They have a different artistic convention. It's because story transcends media, but storytelling is dependent upon the media. Storytelling is an artistic convention that bridges the limitations of the technology to the limitlessness of our imagination. And it's that bridge that artists bring to amplify anything you can do with technology or virtual worlds. And a lot of it is what you don't do. So for instance, a book, Ernest Hemingway says that healing writes 1/8 the story experience. The reader brings 7/8 of that. That story is beyond the page. It is the stuff that, now, they aren't playing the author. They aren't working at writing like he was. In fact, he worked harder to write less so that it could provoke more in the imagination of the audience. And that's what I did in theme parks and all the other mediums that I've worked in, is we're painting with the audience's imagination. That's where the magic is, behind the eyeballs. And so we really have a wonderful opportunity to leverage all of these conventions in the mixed reality. Because it's a convergence of media, we can start pulling from all the different mediums, different conventions. But some are based upon this old limitation that's no longer there anymore, and some are timeless. I mean, we still want a flashback, even though, maybe it was done differently in theater or film. And so one of the things I want to do is take a look at it not through the eyes of the old media, but really look at it as in the form of a mixed media. Well, I call the phenomenology of the imagination. Because mixed reality is really kind of first looking at the phenomenology, the external, both real or virtual. They're all outside there. They're just objects, be it virtual or real. And what happens is that these interact with our imagination. We take in with all our senses, and it triggers things in our minds, our memories, and our dreams, and that we attach stories to these things. And that's what's happening in what I call the imaginality, the third reality that rules all other realities. And it's really important that we see that that is the main tool. That's the central processing unit. And when we come into augmented reality is in between the real and the virtual. But when we talk about mixed reality, we're looking at the reality, virtuality, and imaginality as one world, not separate, not choosing. It's a spectrum, it's a continuum. You can choose which out of what reality you want, in what sense, in what direction, in what dimension. Those are palettes to the artist to create the story they need to. And so with each one of these reality, imaginality, and virtuality, you have different, I don't know, I'm sorry about that. So each of these, we can use conventions in entertainment that I use and combined, and that is really looking at the play, the story, which is it's painting with the audience's imagination and striking your heart, grabbing your heart, and telling you, why should I care? And that goes into the physicality of play, where you engage their hands and stuff. What do I do? What do I interact with? What's real that is tangible? And then that goes into the virtuality of games, with the game mechanics that escalates the investment in the exchange, in immersion. And those work together in very interesting ways. And once you have real-time immersion, you can't separate those any longer. They're distinct three aspects of interactive entertainment, but work simultaneously together. This is what we call a phygital interspace. This is one of the things that we use without head mounts, with physical aspects interacting with virtual worlds. This was to teach science education. It was kind of, looking at a fictitious phenomenon of a vernal pool, and people worked with interactive things. And what was really interesting is that the social nature of things, is that students were more likely to be able to be challenged, deal with ambiguous and frustrating aspects more enjoyably. And when they're with someone, and alone they were negative, but with someone it was positive. So this aspect of relationship was very important. So the story and relationship with that. And so we add this to aphasia therapy that was dealing with a full mixed reality world. And in this mixed reality world, we have the therapist and the aphasia patient, and she'll explain what aphasia is, if she has.
Brain injury, usually stroke, but it can't. Aphasia is a loss of language due to some type of a brain injury, usually stroke, but it can be disease, it can be trauma, it can be a tumor. For the person with aphasia, that interconnection with another human being is extremely important for them. That connectedness that they feel with another person is extremely important. Hi.
Hello. It's really cool.
It is
It's
cool.
really cool to see, because you can see behind you, there's really cool stuff back there.
What is behind there?
I see you, and I see where a lot of the trees and snap grass right there, and a couple. Here's a big one, a really nice big one.
When the ability to communicate is taken from you, when it's robbed, when you are robbed of your ability to communicate, you're robbed of the essence of who you are. And in the midst of that, like you said, if the therapist is in there with you, I can be feeding you some language to augment, to help you.
Right.
But
So the aphasia therapy up till now was drill and practice of language, relearning language. And one of the things that we're breaking up in these immersive story worlds is it about rediscovering communication with another and participating with life. There's a huge distinction, because the scientific-based evidence of relearning language, there's so much relearning language that that you can do. And so, but in communication is a whole nother area. What's the use of learning a language if you can't participate in life and we can't conduct a communication? So this conversation with story was a powerful way for them to get over their emotions and to get immersed in the world, and the words started to flow. Stories started interacting, which is interesting. But the objects we were working with in that experiment weren't as powerful. And so we said, let's bring in your own objects. And this one buckle trophy was one from one aphasia client, and they had won this just before they had a stroke and had aphasia and lost a lot of their language. And this was something very sad for them because they couldn't participate in these competitions anymore. But it meant so much to them. But when they came in and told that story, the words flowed. When we had a drill and practice of the traditional therapy message of relearning language as opposed to rediscovering communication, it was miles away. I have 4 minutes. And now, this is very meaningful as far as how much these objects have the ability to let stories flow and communicate and relate. Now, if you take a look at the other object, there's some dolls. What does an object say? This is a doll. So in text, you have a doll. It's about play. Probably a child played with it. It's handmade. So that has a certain level of charm. And on eBay, that might be nice, but you might not buy it. But what does that object say beyond what it looks like? Well, the subtext is that it's a doll. It's most likely loved. The play brought joy to that child. The child in itself was innocent. And then this something handmade for them. Someone cared about it. And so that had a subtext to that object. And then you had the context. These dolls were dolls that were made in the concentration camp of Nazi Germany. And these were parents made these dolls for the child to play. And that context was very important because where they were, even though they were loved, they were also hated. What they were giving for play, they were robbed because they weren't allowed to play. And that, as even a child innocent, they were guilty of being a Jew. And then this handmade care was to protect this child's, with play and with joy and being that. And then you go one step farther in the juxtaposition of that. It was in the face of death that they played. And this is where the smallest of the concentration camp prisoners could practice the resistance to the Nazi Germany through play. Even the child could have an act of resistance. And that was through play. And that's what brought the truth through the innocence of the child and the hope of the parents for that child. And some made it and some don't. So this one object has so many layers and deepness of relationships and experience. Now, as I told you that story, I only showed you that picture. How many of you have a picture in your head about this child and what it meant to be like them? Does anybody, who has a clear picture of kind of what that is? Okay, we have some good imaginations. But what happens is that we have a lot of collective memories and knowledge that we put to these objects, and it's a matter of being able to use these objects in juxtaposition to be able to kind of get this story out. And one of the things is that we can tell a story in the movie, that's great, but the Holocaust Museum came to us to say, we need to tell stories differently. We don't want a tidy ending, because this is an open wound. We don't want something that is keeping you quiet. In most story venues, you go, shh, he says quiet. Be quiet in the museum, in the library. Be quiet in the theater. They wanted to start a conversation. They wanted to have this changed behavior. This is active, not passive. And this is very important as the end result of the stories we told. And so that's one of the things that we were being able to look at a story trove that ignited conversation, that engaged one another, brought ambiguity and frustration, which was actually fun. It wasn't problematic. And so we conducted these, and we worked with some interplay theories and working with aphasia clients, and we're working with the Aphasia Access Group and the Aphasia Bank and all these areas that are international in creating this. And what a story trove does is takes advantage of all the different storytelling professions of a historian, an anthropologist, storyteller, all those passionate storytellers, and be able to kind of wrap that in a box like a treasure or a present. And when they open it, it seems like that, bringing these objects and nested into each other. And as you open it up, it's revealing things in your imagination effortlessly, like Ernest Hemingway with his literature, and bringing pictures and notes together in questions. And words were connectors. Words were not the barrier for the aphasia. They were a helper, a connector, so that they could use it as an alternative, so that they didn't feel defeated in telling stories. They felt challenged, frustrated, but still accomplished in what they were doing in the storytelling. And we were looking at ways to be able to look at the author and the authoring and the actor acting and the audience absorbing, which is normal media. But we wanted to invite the audience into being able to participate in the authoring like RPGs, be able to participate in the agency like a participatory theater. We wanted to bring the author in to make them absorb more into perceiving what the user's doing and have that conversation. And with being able to put agencies with the character is like video games and programming characters. And so all these convergence of these different types of art forms of storytelling are coming together. And it's a matter of experimenting with all of those tried and true areas to bring in unique combinations. And this augmented reality gives this option to be able to tell stories differently. And we need to. There's not only one way to tell the story. There's not just one story. Like, for instance, the Holocaust. There's millions of stories. And there's millions of ways to tell stories. And so this is kind of a quick glimpse on the box. And this is kind of a video of some of we put it in an entertainment venue, an educational venue, and a therapy venue. They all played it, for 50 minutes. We didn't tell them how long. They just spent 50 minutes enthralled in this and conversing inside.
Yeah. Dear Thomas.
Is the picture showing up?
Thomas, I am
Okay.
putting your things in the pub for safekeeping. Love, Mother.
Well, let me just wrap up. And so one of the issues here was that each group was as enthralled with all these different aspects, but everyone did it differently. The historians were able to do it delicately and preciously. The 20-something as entertainment just unwrapped it like a Christmas present, and everyone was absorbed, and it just really showed us the power of being able to kind of bring these pieces together. So I ask you, explore new ways of telling stories. There's more ways, and this technology is more than just registering virtual with real. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. We have time for a couple of quick questions.
So, Chris, who curates this? This is a lot of content, a lot of stuff to process. How do you get stuff from these people to the people to appreciate the experience?
Well, the curation is a very difficult thing. We started working with the Holocaust Center, and there's just so much that we're dealing with. So we're starting with fiction. We're taking factual parts of history, and we're weaving the drama of history and making up the in-betweens and seeing how that works strictly as a storytelling device. It's very powerful, and now we're working with the Public History Center in Sanford and the UCF History Department Riches program to really start to now look at how can they curate, because we need the historians and the curators to work with a story convention. So us as storytellers are creating this new convention and making it up as we go. And they're discovering all new possibilities, as well as the therapist. So I'm not going to tell you how they're going to do the therapy. The therapist is working with us with this new tool. The historians are working with us. But right now, it's this story convention that's opening up all new fascinating aspects of engagement.
Thank you for your insight. Would you have any advice for someone who doesn't have access to, the latest technology, but has snippets of information about this, as to how can I today go about starting my own project in storytelling in different ways, in different mediums?
Yeah, we started with the mixed reality with all these hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment. That was discontinued by our sponsor, so we had taken our technology taken away. And so we said, well, let's do it without technology. Let's see where it goes. And it was amazing what opened up. It was amazing the depth. And I'm so glad they did, because I realized how much we were doing too much with the technology and we weren't looking at what that real and imagine can really do. And now what we're doing is slowly layering in the technology and understanding its right position, its right relationship, its right engagement and interaction in its proper sense. Thanks for your question. Now, just do it.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Do you need a Bible?